Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. How are you? Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, now we will come to today's news. And what we have here is the Secret Service law visitor logs in President Biden's house in Delaware. That's right. After the administration, the regime came out and said they had no visitor logs. There's no visitor logs. The Secret Service has now said there are visited logs. Again, this is a motion in order to ensure that they can make Biden resign. He has worn off his usefulness for the regime. Of course, Obama and the rest of them are forcing this, and they are priming Kamala Harris to take over. So let's go ahead and dive into this new development in the story, with Secret Service coming out and saying there are indeed visitor logs for the people who have entered into the Biden home. So let's go and dive into what we have here coming to us via the gateway punted over here. It says Secret Service has records of regular visitors to the Biden Delaware home. Fox News reported on Thursday that a source familiar has told them that the Secret Service has records of regular visitors to Biden's home in Delaware. The agency is prepared to turn over to congressional investigators, contradicting statements by the White House counsel's office and in a Secret Service spokesperson that no visitor logs have been kept. The issue of the visitor logs are records of Biden tell him as part of the investigations into the discovery of the illicit unsecure classified documentations. Are recently found in several locations, including the garage and Biden's home. Representative Komar out of Kentucky, chairman and oversight committee, sent a letter to the White House on Sunday demanding the visitor logs for Biden's home. While the White House has not kept a formal list, the Secret Service does collect information on guests with regular access to the home. Retention of the names of those vetted by the Secret Service depends on the variety of factors, including proximity to the president and the nature of the background check. A source familiar with the situation told Fox News that the Secret Service is prepared to provide available background information on vetted guests to the Biden residence if requested by Congress. What a street view of President home, So earlier this week, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Uniluman told reporters that the agency does not keep visitor logs for the Biden private residence. This was via NBC News. Secret Service spokesman said, "We don't independently maintain our own visitor logs because it's a private residence." He added the Secret Service does perform background checks on those who come in contact with the Bidens at their home. But the U.S. Secret Service only retains the document for a limited time. But he also noted that the agency will cooperate with congressional requests for the information. The White House Counsel Office also released a statement on Monday denying keeping visitor logs at the Delaware home, likely ever present across decades to monitor history. His personal residence is personal. But upon taking office, Biden restored the norm of keeping White House visitor logs, including published and regularly after previous administrations have ended up. He said the Apt reported on Friday that Biden has spent nearly 200 days of his presidency in the Delaware home. So we're going to see what comes up this again. I am pretty certain that my gut tells me again, citing back to what Rush Limbaugh said back in the December of 2020. That when Biden outlived his usefulness for the regime, they would replace them within his presidency. Again, I don't see Biden finishing his term as president. I see him being forced to resign, and the installation of Kamala Harris will be complete. That means in their minds, they can maybe get 10 years of Kamala Harris. That means that she would get her own 4-year term if you were to run for president. And then if you ran again, if you were to win, that would be another 4 years, 8 years. Plus the last 2 years of this administration would be 10 years of Kamala Harris and Democrats in control or globalist control of the White House. And then some significant news. House Republican Oversight Chairman James Comer announced his hearing on, worst border crisis in American history. James Comey announced on Thursday the committee will hold a hearing on the policies that have, ignited the Biden border crisis. Comer said in a written statement, Biden's radical open borders agenda has ignited the worst border crisis in American history. The Biden administration's deliberate actions are fueling human smuggling, stimulating drug cartel operations, enabling deadly drugs such as fentanyl to flow into American communities, and encouraging illegal immigrants to flout U.S. immigration laws. Republicans will hold the Biden administration accountable for this ongoing humanitarian, national security and public health crisis that has turned to every town into a border town. The hearing, which will commence the week of February 6, will include a Border Patrol agents including Jason Owens, Gloria Chavez, and Patricia McGurk. Daniel. Chairman Comer also requested Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to provide documents, communications, and information about DHS, role in, quote, undermining efforts to secure the southern border. The Kentucky conservative side of that the Biden administration has continued to implement failed policies, including the DHS's expansion of the unlawful abuse of the parole process to bring in 30,000 foreign nationals per month. Comer also accused the Biden administration of moving towards its ultimate goal of enacting a massive amnesty of illegal aliens. Unofficial Border Patrol estimates put at roughly 844,000 the number of migrants who were either apprehended after crossing the border or were, quote, gotaways during the first quarter of 2023. Recent poll says Joe Biden's approval nearing the lowest level of presidency at 40%. The 40% comes from a 3-day national Reuters poll that closed on Sunday with 1,035,000 adults and a 3% margin of error. The recent poll numbers are nearing the lowest approval levels, the mid to high 30s he saw in the middle of last year. During his first 2 years in office, Biden had numerous bad poll numbers after overcoming several problems. Some of the problems Biden saw in the first half of his presidency, including the country going through a major supply chain crisis, a baby formula shortage, the botched Afghan withdrawal, and record high inflation. The country also saw record high gas prices in 2022. Biden's State Department launches Welcome Course program that asks Americans to help resettle 125,000 refugees in the U.S. Last year, the Biden administration announced a massive increase in the annual number of refugees it would try to resettle across American communities. Though the cap is merely a numerical limit and not a goal to be reached. Top officials have suggested they are looking to resettle about 125,000 refugees in fiscal year 2023. Biden's refugee cap is 8 times the 15,000 cap set by President Trump as part of the administration's goal to drastically increase refugee resettlement. The State Department has launched the Welcome Course program that effectively allows Americans and green card holders to sponsor refugees for resettlement in the United States. This year alone, the State Department is looking to have at least 10,000 Americans helped resettle about 5,000 refugees through the program. By summer, State Department officials said they hope to turn refugee resettlement into a quasi-chain migration effort where Americans and green card holders can sponsor refugees that they choose to come into the United States. Chain migration is the process where newly naturalized citizens can bring an unlimited number of foreign relatives into the U.S. on green cards. More than 7 in 10 illegal immigrants arriving in the United States today do so solely because they have relatives already living within the country. Biden administration announced his massive $2.5 billion weapons package for Ukraine. The Biden administration on Thursday announced another massive weapons package for Ukraine. U.S. pledged a $2.5 billion package of military aid for Ukraine, which includes 59 Bradley fighting vehicles, missiles, Avenger air defense systems, and more. Recently, CBS released a documentary entitled Arming Ukraine. The documentary looks into what has happened to the military weapons that have been given to Ukraine. The documentary exposed that only 30% of weapons given to Ukraine actually reached their final destination. Proxy voting has ended and McCarthy requires Congress to show up if they want their vote to count out. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy announced on Thursday that members of Congress are no longer allowed to cast proxy votes and must instead vote in person. The practice of voting by proxy was established by former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi in May of 2020 to allow lawmakers to observe recommended pandemic protocol. Pelosi then extended the policy several times. The policy allowed lawmakers to avoid in-person voting and instead cast their decision by letter, where another member of Congress announced the vote on their behalf. On Thursday, McCarthy shared on Twitter, quote, "No more proxy voting effective immediately. Members of Congress have to show up to work if they want their vote to count." While members from both sides of the aisle have taken advantage of the proxy voting policy, some Republicans have argued that it could lead to lawmakers neglecting their duties. In 2020, McCarthy filed a lawsuit against former Speaker Nancy Pelosi challenging the proxy voting policy, which the Supreme Court ultimately appealed. Despite 160 Republicans signing the lawsuit by December 2021, 80% of all House members have voted by proxy, according to a Brookings Institute study. While the policy was initially implemented for health reasons, House members used the "public health emergency policy" to attend other events and functions that conflicted with their schedules. In December, McCarthy promised to end the policy. Once Republicans took control of the House in the new year, "The Senate has managed to maintain in-person floor voting for the entirety of the past 2 years, much with older population and a 50-50 makeup no less." McCarthy stated your continuous quotes from the get-go. "We warned that proxy voting would be misused as a means of convenience, rather than a precaution for health, and it has been by members of both parties." Biden-Hu-D proposes rule requiring localities to submit housing equity plans. Biden's Department of Housing and Urban Development is taking steps towards requiring state and local governments to submit equity plans to the federal government to display compliance to fair housing rules. Biden's Hu-D submitted a proposed rule that would require local governments to submit plans and reports relating to civil rights concerns or else risk losing subsidies from the federal government. The requirements are part of a rule called "Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing" and are set to follow through on one portion of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. One version of the rule had been implemented under the Obama administration before it was repealed by President Donald Trump, who warned that Democrats, "would abolish our beautiful and successful suburbs by placing far-left Washington bureaucrats in charge of local zoning decisions." President Trump also stated that should Democrats implement their housing policies, "your home will go down in value and crime rates will rapidly rise." The Biden administration partially restored the Obama-era housing rule in June of 2022, before proposing this new rule, which includes compliance requirements for local governments. Under the new rule, housing authorities would be required to submit equity plans every 5 years. The plans would have to specifically include, "an analysis of fair housing issues confronting their community's goals and strategies to remedy those issues in concrete ways and a description of community engagement." Thank you very much. WWG1WGA. Give me your thoughts below and hit subscribe. See you again.